Did you know the most shocking moment in Straw Dogs wasn't in the original script? Director Sam Peckinpah rewrote it just days before filming, creating one of cinema's most unforgettable scenes. Straw Dogs hit theaters in 1971 and shook everyone who watched. Dustin Hoffman played a quiet math professor who discovers something dark inside himself. The movie asked scary questions about violence and civilized people. It made audiences squirm and think. Let's dive in and discover 20 weird and amazing facts about Straw Dogs. Number 20. The title comes from ancient Chinese wisdom. Sam Peckinpah found the title in an old Chinese book called the Tao Te Ching. The book talks about how nature treats all creatures like straw dogs, things used in ceremonies and then thrown away without feeling. Peckinpah loved this cold idea. He saw his main character, David, as someone the village people could treat like trash. They mocked him for being American, for being smart, for being different. They pushed and pushed until something inside him snapped. Peckinpah wanted everyone watching to understand that any person has a breaking point. Push hard enough, and even gentle people become dangerous. The title wasn't random words that sounded cool. It was a warning about human nature hiding under polite surfaces. When Dustin Hoffman first read the script, he asked what the strange title meant. Peckinpah smiled and told him it meant people are nothing until they prove they're something. That answer changed how Hoffman played David. He made him soft-spoken and careful, but with something fierce sleeping underneath. The ancient words became a prophecy that played out on screen. What seemed mysterious became the whole movie's secret truth. Number 19. Dustin Hoffman nearly walked away. Dustin Hoffman arrived in England as a big star. Movies like The Graduate and Midnight Cowboy had made him famous worldwide. But Straw Dogs almost broke him into pieces. Sam Peckinpah was known for torturing his actors to get real performances. He wanted authentic fear and rage and exhaustion on camera. Hoffman thought he could handle anything a director threw at him. He was completely wrong. During the first week of shooting, Peckinpah yelled at him in front of everyone. The director called Hoffman weak and said a real man would understand the character better. Hoffman felt humiliated and tiny. He seriously considered packing his bags and flying straight back to America. His wife begged him to stay and finish what he started. She reminded him that the hardest roles create the best performances. Hoffman stayed, but the tension between him and Peckinpah never disappeared. The director kept pushing and pushing. He wouldn't tell Hoffman what happened in upcoming scenes. He wanted genuine confusion and panic when the cameras rolled. During the big siege at the end, Hoffman truly didn't know what would happen next. His fear wasn't pretend. By the final week, Hoffman and Peckinpah stopped talking directly. They sent messages through other people. Yet somehow, this awful situation created perfect acting. Hoffman's character feels trapped and lost because Hoffman himself felt trapped and lost. The pain behind the camera became power on screen. Number 18. They built a fake village. The Cornish village in the movie looks completely real. Old stone houses, narrow muddy roads, misty green hills. Everything feels like it's been there for centuries. But most of it was constructed just for filming. Peckinpah needed total control over the location. He wanted tight spaces where David would feel surrounded with no escape. He wanted dark corners where violence could hide. The crew found a small area in Cornwall and built extra buildings around existing ones. They made new wood look ancient using chemicals and dirt. Fresh paint was scraped and weathered to seem decades old. The pub where much of the story happens was a tiny, real building that got expanded so cameras and equipment could fit inside. Local people were hired as extras, but they never saw the complete sets all at once. Peckinpah kept different filming areas separated. He didn't want anyone understanding the full layout before shooting started. This created real confusion among the actors. When the villagers attacked the house at the end, some actors actually got lost trying to find entrances and windows. Their frustration added authenticity to the chaos. After filming wrapped, most of the fake structures got torn down. The village went back to being quiet and normal. Tourists sometimes visit, looking for the famous pub or the farmhouse. They only find empty fields and confused local residents. The movie's dark world existed for a few months, then vanished like smoke. Number 17. The dead cat scene. Almost got deleted. One of the most disturbing moments shows David and Amy finding their strangled cat hanging in their bedroom closet. The scene is quick but horrifying. It proves the villagers will destroy anything to terrorize this couple. But studio executives hated this scene with passion. They begged Peckinpah to cut it completely. They argued that audiences could stomach violence between people but not harm to innocent animals. They predicted people would walk out of theaters in disgust. Peckinpah absolutely refused to remove it. He explained that the cat's death was essential to the story. It showed the villagers weren't just tough guys playing games. They were willing to murder innocents to send a message. The cat represented everything gentle and safe in David and Amy's life together. Killing it meant killing their last bit of peace. Peckinpah won the argument, but he made a compromise. The dead cat appears on screen for only a few seconds. The camera doesn't linger or show details. We see enough to understand what happened, then it's over. Despite being so brief, test audiences remembered that moment more than almost anything else. People gasped out, loud when they saw it. Some covered their eyes, even though it passed quickly. The scene accomplished exactly what Peckinpah wanted. It made viewers understand that nothing was safe anymore, not even helpless creatures. What seemed too cruel became unforgettably powerful. Number 16. Susan George. Was barely an adult. Susan George played Amy, David's young wife caught between her past and her present. She seemed mature and complicated on screen. In real life, she had just turned 20 years old when filming started. George had been acting since she was a little girl, but Straw Dogs demanded something far beyond her previous experience. Peckinpah cast her because she had a mysterious quality he couldn't quite name. She could look vulnerable and strong in the same moment. She could play innocence and knowledge without seeming fake. But during the harsh filming schedule, her youth showed clearly. The difficult scenes left her shaking and pale. Between takes, she would sit alone in corners, trembling. Older crew members tried to comfort her, but she pushed through the hard moments by herself. Hoffman, dealing with his own battles with Peckinpah, barely spoke to her when cameras weren't rolling. George felt completely isolated and alone. She later described making this movie as one of the most difficult experiences of her entire life. Yet she never complained out loud during production. She understood instinctively that the film was important. She sensed it would become something people discussed and argued about for generations. Her instinct proved absolutely correct. Susan George's performance in Straw Dogs remains the role everyone remembers her for. Critics still debate whether her character is sympathetic or not. She brought complicated depth to Amy that the written script alone couldn't provide. A 20-year-old created a symbol of conflicted womanhood. Her youth made the achievement even more impressive. Number 15. Real village people played the villagers. Sam Peckinpah didn't want trained actors pretending to be rural working men. He wanted authenticity that you could feel. The casting team recruited actual locals from surrounding areas. They found farmers, construction workers, pub owners, men with calloused hands and genuine thick accents. Most had never acted in anything before. Peckinpah actually preferred this complete inexperience. He taught them basic camera blocking and where to stand, then let their real personalities come through. The result feels deeply unsettling. The villagers in Straw Dogs don't feel like movie characters performing evil. They feel like actual dangerous people you might encounter in a remote place, far from cities. Their cruelty isn't dramatic or theatrical. It's casual and almost bored, like swatting flies. They torment David because they're bored, because he's an outsider, because nothing stops them. During breaks between filming, these men would sit around telling stories from their actual lives. Peckinpah listened carefully to everything they said. He incorporated their natural speech patterns and attitudes into the script. Lines got rewritten to match how they really talked. The hunting scene where the villagers take David into the woods came partly from a real story one local man told about hazing outsiders who moved into the area. That authenticity made audiences deeply uncomfortable in a way polished acting never could. People watching felt like they were seeing real evil, not performed evil. The villagers' laughter sounded genuine because it was genuine. Men who worked hard physical jobs every day brought a physicality that drama school couldn't teach. Real locals created real danger. Number 14. The farmhouse. Had no power or heat. The isolated farmhouse where David and Amy try to make a life wasn't just a movie set. It was an actual abandoned cottage that nobody had lived in for many years. When location scouts found it, there was no electricity, no heating system, and barely any roof left. The production team had to make it functional enough for filming while keeping it looking authentically old and run down. They installed temporary power lines for lights and camera equipment, but kept the interior looking miserable and worn. This created serious problems for everyone working there. England in autumn gets bone cold and damp. Cast and crew arrived at 5 in the morning to find frost coating the windows from the inside. Dustin Hoffman wore extra layers under his costume that the camera couldn't see. Susan George shivered constantly between takes. Everyone huddled around portable heaters whenever possible. Peckinpah absolutely refused to use a more comfortable location. He wanted the bitter discomfort visible in every frame. He wanted David and Amy to look cold and miserable because they actually were cold and miserable in real life. The strategy worked perfectly. Watch their scenes with attention. You can see their breath in the air. Their movements look stiff and uncomfortable. They look like people barely surviving in an unwelcoming place. Because that's exactly what was happening behind the cameras. The farmhouse became almost another character in the story. It feels claustrophobic and hostile. It never once feels like a safe home. A real abandoned cottage made that feeling unavoidable and true. Number 13. Peckinpah studied soccer hooligans. Sam Peckinpah studied violence the way scientists study diseases. He wanted to understand what makes regular people hurt each other. Before filming Straw Dogs, he watched countless hours of British football matches. He wasn't interested in the sport itself. He focused obsessively on fan violence. In the early 1970s, British football hooliganism was getting worse and worse. Young men would riot in streets and stadiums over team loyalty. Peckinpah saw something crucial in this behavior. These weren't criminals or trained soldiers. They were ordinary people with jobs and families who became savage in groups. The pack mentality fascinated him completely. He noticed how individuals who seemed reasonable alone became monsters when surrounded by others who encouraged them. This observation shaped how he directed the villagers. They're most dangerous together in groups. Alone, several of them seem almost normal or even friendly. But when they gather, something dark and ugly emerges from the collective. The siege sequence mirrors football riot violence precisely. The villagers move like a mob. They feed off each other's energy and excitement. They dare each other to go further and further. Peckinpah even copied specific movements he'd observed. The way the villagers circle the house resembles how hooligans surround their opponents. Their chanting and laughing echo stadium crowds, working themselves into frenzy. Critics who called Straw Dogs gratuitously violent completely missed this point. Peckinpah wasn't inventing violence from imagination. He was showing what already existed in the real world. Football hooliganism proved ordinary people contained extraordinary brutality. The movie just made it impossible to look away. Number 12. One scene changed. Cinema forever. Straw Dogs contains a sequence that remains controversial over 50 years later. The scene is extremely difficult to watch and has been endlessly debated by critics, scholars, and audiences. Some called it exploitative and unnecessary. Others argued it was essential to understanding the characters and themes. The controversy nearly destroyed the film's entire reputation. In some countries, censors demanded it be completely removed. Peckinpah refused every single demand. He argued the scene revealed essential truths about power, violence, and human darkness. He insisted he wasn't glorifying anything but showing its true horror. The actors involved struggled terribly with filming it. Susan George needed many breaks and spent hours discussing it with Peckinpah beforehand. Hoffman, though not in the sequence himself, felt deeply disturbed knowing it was being shot nearby. The crew worked in near-total silence. Nobody made jokes between takes. Everyone understood they were creating something that would haunt viewers for decades. Peckinpah himself seemed shaken during those difficult days. He took longer breaks than usual. He spoke very quietly and gently to George between takes, making absolutely sure she felt supported and safe. The final edited version was shorter than what they originally filmed. Even Peckinpah realized some moments were simply too much. The scene remains divisive to this day. Film schools still debate whether to show it. Some professors refuse to screen Straw Dogs at all because of it. Others argue it's essential viewing for understanding how cinema depicts violence. Regardless of personal opinion, the scene changed everything. It made dismissing Straw Dogs as just another thriller completely impossible. Number 11. Hoffman's glasses. Weren't costume pieces. Dustin Hoffman wears glasses throughout the entire movie, and everyone assumed they were just props from the costume department. They weren't props at all. Hoffman actually needed them to see clearly. His natural nearsightedness became an accidental but crucial part of David's character. Peckinpah realized early during rehearsals that the glasses added tremendous vulnerability to David's appearance. They made him look intellectual and bookish, but physically weak. They suggested someone who lives in abstract ideas rather than physical reality. So Peckinpah emphasized them deliberately throughout filming. He'd have Hoffman remove them during tense confrontations, making David seem even more helpless and exposed. He'd have them get knocked off during fights, forcing Hoffman to fumble around half-blind. These moments weren't in the original script. They emerged organically from Hoffman's real physical limitation. The famous climactic sequence where David defends the farmhouse includes a moment when his glasses break completely. Hoffman genuinely couldn't see properly afterward. His squinting and careful movements weren't acting choices. He was actually navigating the chaos while barely able to see anything clearly. Hoffman later said that broken glasses moment was one of his personal favorites in the entire film. It perfectly captured David's desperate situation. He's fighting for survival in a world he can't even see properly. The glasses transformed from a simple medical necessity into a powerful symbol and metaphor. An actor's real weakness became his character's defining vulnerability and strength. Number 10. The siege was shot in real-time order. Most movies film scenes completely out of order for practical efficiency. A 2-hour film might shoot the ending first and the beginning last. Straw Dogs broke this standard rule during the climactic siege sequence. Peckinpah absolutely insisted on filming the entire final battle chronologically from start to finish. He wanted genuine accumulating exhaustion in the actors. He wanted real mounting fear building over days. The siege takes up nearly the final third of the movie. David and the mentally disabled man he's protecting barricade themselves inside the farmhouse while angry villagers attack from outside. It's almost 30 minutes of sustained, unbearable tension. Filming it chronologically meant the cast and crew worked on absolutely nothing else for 2 solid weeks. Every single day they returned to the same claustrophobic sets, the same violent actions, the same building terror. Dustin Hoffman's exhaustion on screen was completely real and not performed. By the final days of shooting, he looked genuinely haggard and worn down. His voice was hoarse from constant yelling. His hands were bruised and scraped from all the physical action. The actors playing the attacking villagers also showed authentic accumulated fatigue. Their attacks became more desperate and frustrated. Their anger felt real because it was becoming real. They'd been trying to break into that farmhouse for 2 weeks straight. The chronological approach created something unique in cinema. Most movie violence feels safe and choreographed, like a dance. The siege in Straw Dogs feels chaotic and genuinely dangerous. Order created chaos that looked completely uncontrolled and real. Number 9. Nobody knew how it would end. Sam Peckinpah loved keeping his actors in the dark. Throughout the Straw Dogs production, he rarely gave anyone complete scripts. Actors would receive just their scenes days before filming, sometimes mere hours before. But his biggest secret involved the ending itself. Nobody except Peckinpah and his closest crew members knew how the story would conclude. Dustin Hoffman filmed the entire exhausting siege without knowing whether David would survive or die. The actors playing villagers didn't know which of them would be killed or how they'd die. This massive uncertainty created genuine unpredictability in every performance. Every single moment feels like it could go anywhere because the actors themselves had no idea where things were headed. When they finally filmed the movie's actual conclusion, David driving the injured man away while delivering his now famous final line, Hoffman learned his dialogue only that morning. Peckinpah wanted his delivery completely fresh and unrehearsed, straight from raw instinct. The strategy worked brilliantly and created something special. Hoffman's performance in those final moments has a strange, disconnected quality. David seems genuinely shocked by his own actions, almost confused about what he's become. That wasn't careful acting technique. It was Hoffman genuinely processing the ending for the very first time himself. Other cast members watched the final scene being filmed and only then realized how everything concluded. Some felt surprised. Others thought it fit perfectly. But everyone agreed Peckinpah's obsessive secrecy had created something truly special. Mystery behind the camera became mystery captured on screen. Number 8. Many countries banned it completely. Straw Dogs opened in American theaters in December 1971. Critics were sharply divided down the middle. Some called it a brilliant masterpiece. Others called it disgusting garbage. But at least Americans could watch it and decide for themselves. Many other countries weren't given that choice at all. The United Kingdom banned Straw Dogs entirely and completely. Despite being filmed largely in England with mostly British actors, the movie couldn't legally be shown in any British cinema. The ban lasted until 1995, nearly 25 years of prohibition. British censors objected strongly to the violence and especially to the controversial scene discussed earlier. They argued the film encouraged violence against women. Peckinpah's defenders argued the movie actually condemned such violence, but censors completely disagreed. Australia also banned it totally. So did several Scandinavian countries. New Zealand allowed a heavily butchered version that removed nearly 15 minutes of footage. These massive cuts destroyed the movie's careful rhythm and deeper meaning. Peckinpah was absolutely furious when he learned about the bans. He called censors cowards hiding from difficult truths. He argued they actually proved his point. People prefer ignoring ugly realities rather than confronting them honestly. The bans created a very strange situation. Straw Dogs became famous partly because people couldn't see it. It developed an underground reputation as forbidden knowledge. Bootleg copies circulated secretly. People whispered about it like it contained dangerous secrets. When the British ban finally lifted in the mid-90s, a whole new generation could finally watch. Many were genuinely surprised. They expected something far more shocking based on the ban's extraordinary length. The ban had been about fear more than actual content. Number 7. The lead actors never talked about their roles. Dustin Hoffman and Susan George were the movie's central married couple. Their troubled relationship drives the entire story forward. Yet, throughout the entire filming schedule, they barely spoke about David and Amy at all. They never sat down together to discuss their characters' shared history or feelings. They never privately rehearsed scenes to build chemistry. This wasn't accidental or unfortunate. Peckinpah deliberately kept them separated and distant. He wanted visible tension between them on screen. He wanted them feeling like uncomfortable strangers trapped together by a bad decision. The strategy created a unique and unsettling dynamic. Watch their scenes with careful attention. David and Amy don't seem like a couple who understands or even likes each other much. They seem like two people who made a terrible mistake getting married and now can't escape. Their conversations feel awkward and strained. Their silences feel heavy with unspoken resentment and regret. All of this came directly from Hoffman and George's real distance during production. Between takes, they'd retreat to completely separate areas. Hoffman would review his handwritten notes and prepare mentally. George would sit alone or chat with various crew members. They remained professional and polite always, but never friendly or warm. Some cast members found this strange and uncomfortable. Others recognized Peckinpah's deliberate manipulation at work. The director was famous for these psychological tactics. He'd pit actors against each other to create genuine, visible conflict. Years later, both Hoffman and George admitted they wished they'd connected more as people during filming. But they also acknowledged the enforced distance served the movie perfectly. David and Amy needed to feel fundamentally disconnected. If the actors had been actual friends, that disconnection wouldn't have felt so painfully real. Number 6. The math problems were actually real. Dustin Hoffman's character, David, is a professional mathematician. The movie shows him working on complex equations, surrounded by papers covered with mysterious symbols and numbers. Most movies fake this kind of thing completely. They have actors scribble random nonsense that just looks vaguely mathematical to general audiences. Straw Dogs took a completely different and more honest approach. Peckinpah hired an actual working mathematician as a consultant. He wanted David's work to be completely legitimate and accurate. If real mathematicians watched the movie, Peckinpah wanted them recognizing genuine problems and valid solution methods. The consultant worked directly with Hoffman for many hours. He taught him what the equations actually meant and how real mathematicians think and work. Hoffman spent considerable time learning to write the special symbols correctly. He practiced until his hand movements looked completely natural and believable. During actual filming, Hoffman could explain in detail what David was working on. He understood the problems deeply, even though he couldn't actually solve them himself. This obsessive attention to tiny detail added crucial depth to David's character. He's not just a generic smart guy with glasses. He's specifically a mathematician, someone who can solve incredibly abstract problems in his head while the physical world crumbles violently around him. The contrast is extremely powerful. David can navigate impossibly complex theoretical spaces, but can't navigate simple, basic social situations. He understands abstract symbols perfectly, but can't understand actual people at all. Real, legitimate mathematics made this contrast work beautifully. If the equations had been obvious nonsense, David would have seemed completely fake. Real math made him utterly real. It showed Peckinpah's absolute commitment to authenticity. Even tiny details that most viewers would never notice or understand had to be completely genuine and honest. Number 5. They used real glass in the pub fight action scenes. In movies, typically use special breakaway props for safety. Bottles are made from sugar glass that shatters harmlessly. Furniture is carefully constructed to collapse without causing any injury. Straw Dogs completely ignored these standard safety measures in one crucial sequence. The violent pub fight, where open violence first erupts, used completely real glass. real heavy bottles, real windows, real mirrors. Peckinpah wanted the sound to be absolutely authentic. He wanted the visible danger to be real and felt. The actors and stuntmen were genuinely terrified when they learned this. A real bottle smashing into someone's head could easily kill them. Real glass shards flying through air could permanently blind someone. But Peckinpah absolutely insisted, despite all the frightened objections. He promised extremely careful choreography and multiple camera angles, to avoid needing repetition. The entire fight was rehearsed intensively for several days straight. Every single movement was meticulously planned. Every bottle that would break had a specific predetermined target. When actual filming finally began, the tension was absolutely incredible. One small mistake could send someone straight to the hospital. The performers moved carefully and precisely despite appearing wild and out of control. Their intense focus created accidental perfection. The pub fight feels absolutely real because it genuinely was real. The sharp sound of breaking glass makes viewers physically wince. The clear fear visible on actors' faces isn't performed emotion. They were genuinely afraid of being seriously hurt. One stuntman did get badly cut, a deep gash on his forearm requiring 6 stitches. Peckinpah felt terrible, but also oddly satisfied. The real injury proved the danger was genuine, which meant the scene was genuine. Modern film safety standards would never allow this approach. Insurance companies would absolutely refuse coverage. But in 1971, Peckinpah could take crazy risks that created unforgettable, powerful moments. Number 4. Peckinpah drank heavily. Throughout production, Sam Peckinpah had a long, complicated relationship with alcohol. By the time he made Straw Dogs, that relationship had become a serious, destructive problem. He arrived on set most mornings already smelling of alcohol. He continued drinking steadily throughout each day. By evening, he was usually heavily intoxicated and slurring. The cast and crew reacted to this very differently. Some found it unprofessional and genuinely dangerous. Others recognized that Peckinpah, despite constant drinking, remained a truly brilliant director. His creative instincts stayed razor-sharp, even when his speech became unclear. His incredible eye for visual composition never wavered at all. Some of the movie's absolute best moments were filmed when Peckinpah could barely stand upright. The siege sequence, now universally considered a masterpiece of sustained tension, was directed by a man consuming a full bottle of whiskey daily during those 2 intense weeks. His assistant director handled basic technical details, while Peckinpah focused entirely on performances and raw emotion. The constant drinking seriously affected the production's overall mood. Peckinpah could become explosively angry without any warning. He'd scream viciously at crew members for tiny, meaningless mistakes. Then, hours later, he'd apologize emotionally with actual tears streaming down his face. Dustin Hoffman found this exhausting and confusing. He never knew which version of Peckinpah would appear each morning. Susan George felt genuinely frightened by his unpredictable volatility. But they also recognized his undeniable genius despite everything. Drunk or sober, Peckinpah understood violence and fear better than anyone else working in cinema. He could make audiences feel things other directors couldn't even approach. His alcoholism eventually completely destroyed his career and contributed directly to his early death. But during Straw Dogs, it somehow coexisted with pure brilliance. A deeply troubled man made a deeply troubling masterpiece. Number 3. The studio fought the strange title. Straw Dogs confused absolutely everyone who heard it. Studio executives hated the title with passion. They argued loudly that nobody would understand what it meant at all. Test audiences strongly confirmed this prediction. People found the title weird, confusing, and off-putting. The studio demanded Sam Peckinpah immediately change it to something clear and commercially appealing. They suggested obvious titles like The Siege or David's Stand or The Trap. Each corporate suggestion made Peckinpah angrier and angrier. He furiously refused every single alternative they proposed. He explained repeatedly what straw dogs meant and why it mattered, but executives didn't care at all about ancient Chinese philosophy. They only cared about ticket sales and box office numbers. The battle lasted for months and became increasingly bitter. The studio actually threatened to release the film with a completely different title, whether Peckinpah approved or not. Peckinpah threatened right back to remove his name from the entire movie. He said he'd tell the press the studio had destroyed and betrayed his artistic vision. Finally, an uncomfortable compromise slowly emerged. The studio would grudgingly keep Straw Dogs as the official title, but all advertising would emphasize Dustin Hoffman's famous name in absolutely huge letters. The strange title would be printed much smaller and less prominently. Peckinpah accepted this compromise very grudgingly. When the movie finally opened, many reviewers specifically commented on the unusual, mysterious title. Some thought it was brilliantly meaningful. Others thought it was pretentious nonsense. But absolutely everyone remembered it clearly. A generic title like The Siege would have been instantly forgotten. Straw Dogs stuck permanently in people's minds. They'd ask each other what it meant. They'd debate the symbolism endlessly. The confusing title became a crucial part of the movie's lasting mystique. Peckinpah had been absolutely right all along. Number 2. The famous final line was never written. Straw Dogs ends with one of cinema's most discussed and debated lines. After surviving the nightmarish siege and driving away with the man he protected, David says something that perfectly captures everything the movie explores about violence and identity. That crucial line wasn't in any version of any script. Dustin Hoffman improvised it completely on the morning they filmed the final scene. Peckinpah had kept the ending totally secret, remember. That morning, he finally sat down and explained to Hoffman exactly how the movie would conclude. They discussed at length what David would be feeling in that moment. Hoffman carefully suggested his character might say something, revealing how profoundly he'd been changed by the violence. They brainstormed many possibilities together. Hoffman tried several completely different lines out loud. Peckinpah responded positively to one particular option. They agreed to film multiple versions, some with that line, some without any line, some with different alternatives. They'd make the final choice later during editing. The version that ended up in the finished movie came from the very first take. Hoffman delivered the line almost as a confused question, his voice sounding distant and strangely disconnected. Peckinpah knew immediately and instinctively it was absolutely perfect. They filmed the planned alternatives anyway, just for safety and options. But during long editing sessions, Peckinpah kept returning obsessively to that very first take. It had something mysterious the others completely lacked. Hoffman's performance captured a man who discovered something terrible and true about his own nature. The improvised line suggests David actually enjoyed the violence. It suggests he found unexpected purpose in the chaos. It suggests the supposedly civilized mathematician discovered he was never really civilized at all. That one spontaneous moment completely transformed the ending's meaning. Without it, David would have seemed like a hero who survived. With it, he becomes something far more complicated and genuinely disturbing. Number 1. Peckinpah never watched his own film. Sam Peckinpah poured absolutely everything into Straw Dogs. It nearly killed him physically and mentally. The constant stress, the heavy drinking, the vicious fights with actors and studio executives, all of it took a terrible, devastating toll. When filming finally ended, Peckinpah completely collapsed. He spent an entire week in a hospital suffering from severe exhaustion and dangerous alcohol poisoning. Doctors told him bluntly he needed to stop drinking immediately or he'd die young. He ignored their warnings completely. During the long post-production phase, Peckinpah worked obsessively on editing every frame. He personally supervised every single cut, every sound effect, every music cue. He spent countless months in dark editing rooms, carefully shaping the violence and unbearable tension until everything felt exactly right. But when the final cut was completely finished, when the movie was ready for public release, Peckinpah simply walked away. He never attended the premiere screening. He never sat in any theater and watched Straw Dogs with a regular audience. He never even watched it alone at home, in private. For the rest of his life, he died in 1984 at only 59 years old. Peckinpah carefully avoided his own movie. Friends asked him why many times. He'd give different answers, depending on his mood. Sometimes he said the experience had been too emotionally painful. Sometimes he said he knew exactly what he'd made and didn't need to see it again. Sometimes he'd just shake his head sadly and change the subject completely. Some people thought this was simple cowardice. Others saw it as pure artistic integrity and strength. Peckinpah had made exactly the movie he intended. Whether audiences loved it or hated it didn't matter anymore. His complete vision existed now in the world. That was enough. The director who obsessed over every tiny detail refused to see the complete final result. The man who made one of cinema's most intense, overwhelming experiences couldn't bear experiencing it himself. Bonus fact: the farmhouse still stands today. Most movie locations disappear completely or change beyond recognition. The isolated farmhouse from Straw Dogs still exists right now. It sits in Cornwall, England, looking remarkably similar to how it appeared in 1971. The production team made very few permanent changes. They added some interior walls temporarily for filming purposes, but the basic structure remained completely untouched. After the movie finished shooting, the house sat totally empty for many years. Local people knew it was the Straw Dogs' house, but deliberately avoided going near it. The movie's dark, violent reputation made people genuinely uncomfortable. Some said the house felt haunted, though not by ghosts, by captured violence. Eventually, someone bought the property and carefully converted it into a private residence. They kept many original architectural features intact. The narrow, steep staircase where crucial, frightening scenes occurred remains completely unchanged. The windows the villagers tried desperately breaking through are still there, now with much better locks installed. The current owners occasionally get unexpected visitors. Dedicated film fans somehow track down the exact location and take pictures from the public road. Most are respectful and understanding. They recognize they're looking at someone's actual home, but some try getting closer, peering through windows, recreating specific moments from the movie. The owners have mixed, complicated feelings. They're proud their house has genuine cinema history, but they wish the famous movie wasn't quite so dark and violent. They wish tourists wanted pictures of something cheerful rather than a siege location. The house itself remains silent and still. Stone walls don't remember anything, but everyone who sees it remembers everything. One small cottage became a lasting symbol of humanity's capacity for violence. Old stones, dark memories. Straw Dogs remains difficult and deeply important over 50 years later. Sam Peckinpah wanted to show us something true about ourselves that we'd rather not see. He wanted to prove civilization is much thinner than we like believing. One quiet, gentle man, pushed far enough, became capable of terrible, brutal things. The villagers, normal men with regular jobs and families, became monsters when the pack formed and encouraged them. The movie asks, uncomfortable questions that have no easy answers. When would you fight back? What would you do to survive? How much of your goodness is real, and how much is just safety and comfortable circumstances? Peckinpah never answered these hard questions. He just made us ask them honestly. Dustin Hoffman gave one of his greatest performances. Sam Peckinpah created his most controversial work. Together, they made something unforgettable that still disturbs. If you enjoyed these stories, subscribe for more. Every movie hides a truth, and we'll keep uncovering them, one story at a time.